Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7. Putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
There is a battle among Democrats to unseat incumbent Republican Andy Harris and Maryland's 1st Congressional District. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. One of those is Mike Pullen. He served as the Talbot County Attorney for some 24 years. Pullen is also co-founder of Talbot Rising that works on social, racial, economic, and environmental justice issues on the Eastern Shore. A short review of his views are clearly on the progressive side of the ledger, having been endorsed by the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus. But the Congressional 1st District is a conservative one, with Republicans holding sway on the Eastern Shore. Indeed, it was gerrymandered during former Governor Martin O'Malley's tenure to be even more so, reducing the number of Republican congressional members from 2 to 1 in Maryland. And he is in our studio this morning and to talk about some of the issues. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Don. Glad to be here.
And before we get started, we should take note, of course, of the passing of Kevin Kamenetz. He was running for governor of Maryland in the June Democratic primary. Baltimore County executive woke up early Thursday morning with chest pains and died later that day. Of course, it came as a shock to his colleagues, and of course, we keep his family in our thoughts. And Mike, what are your thoughts this morning as we get this news this week?
Well, it is a terrible shock. Kevin was a terrific public servant, serving about 25 years. He was just dedicated to the public good. We all feel so terrible for his family and his 2 sons and all his friends, and it's just a terrible shock. So my condolences, my heartfelt sympathies, and my just very, very sad.
Brings it also very real. You consider the atmosphere. Yeah. I want to turn to first of all, if you become a congressional member, there's a good chance you may very well face the issue of impeachment. We've had a lot of Trump scandals going on. The allegations of Russian collusion, possible obstruction of justice has been suggested amongst many others. If you were sitting in the House of Representatives, which you could be next year, would you vote to impeach?
Well, Don, that's an excellent question, and what I would like to do is just reserve judgment on that. And depending on the outcome of the Mueller investigation, I think there's multifaceted leads that he's still tracking down. The question of collusion is wide open. Whether there was any impeachable offenses remains to be seen and proven. But having been a trial lawyer for 40 years and represented local governments, I recognize the need to be deliberate and to be thoughtful and to base decisions on the facts. And I think we're going to see what the facts are. I think those facts are going to come out. I think Mueller's team is extremely well qualified and doing a very thorough job. The allegations, or not the allegations, but the revelations that we see in the public press seem to be pretty far-reaching and seem to be, to me, to merit real serious consideration, serious discussion, and further investigation. Once all that comes to the fore, and I'm confident it will, we'll be in a good position to make decisions about what to do, if anything, about them. Impeachment is really a political question as much as a legal one, and I think the Democrats are going to be very thoughtful, be very deliberate, and be very measured, because it's a serious issue, and it's a serious step, and it requires serious deliberation, serious thought.
Would you say that, I know that Congresswoman Maxine Waters out of California, a Democrat, has called for his impeachment, has been pushing that. Think it's just jumped too soon yet?
Well, I think it is a little premature. I think just on the political side of the ledger, there's no question that that's not going to happen at this point, and I think that that question does need to be deferred.
I want to turn to the fact that you're progressive, and we'll be getting into some of the issues. As I mentioned in the introduction, this is a conservative district and was designed actually as so by the former governor, Martin O'Malley. How do you match what your views are to the very conservative area that we live in, particularly here on the Eastern Shore?
Don, that's a great question. Thanks. I consider myself an FDR Democrat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. My view is that the folks that live on the Eastern Shore, the folks that are struggling to get by, the folks that are going to work every day and paying their bills and just worried about their children, worried about their future, worried about their kids' education, their health care, worried about the environment, those are the folks whose values I share. Those are the folks that I want to represent. Those are the folks who really need the understanding that government works. Government works, and it's their government. And I want to be their representative. I want to work for them. In other words, I don't perceive this as a split between progressives and conservatives. I view our values as very similar. My values are family values. I want to help young kids. I want to help children. I want to help families make it. I want to help people that work for a living. I want to help watermen, farmers. I want to help all of the. I believe in the values that have made this country what it is.
Let me ask you this then, because a lot of people I've talked to on the conservative side, regular folks, they see government as the problem,
Correct.
not the solution.
That's
I mean,
correct.
how? So, given what obviously some of the programs that you support, how do you convince them that it's not?
Well, so that's a very broad statement, and it's been accepted as the current narrative, and I get that, and I think the narrative needs to be examined because I don't think the narrative is correct. For example, let's take healthcare, universal healthcare. We are in this together. If every single American was in the same pool and had the same access to the same healthcare system, it would reduce our costs, it would increase our coverage, it would increase the level of health for all Americans, it would make the question of providing health care for your kids irrelevant because it would be provided, and it would be provided for less money. The notion that that universal health care costs more and therefore can't be accomplished is incorrect. Every other country in the world, we're number 11. The first 10 all provide universal health care. They all provide universal health care for less. And there's a misconception about universal health care. It's not socialized medicine. It is absolutely not. We already have it. Medicare, the VA. Now, there's a difference between Medicare and the VA system. Medicare is simply single payer. We have private physicians, private healthcare providers providing the service, but they get paid through Medicare. And the reason that Medicare works, and the reason that it works better, is because it only costs 3% of the total amount of benefits to provide that service. Private insurance, on the other hand, is anywhere from 15 to 20% just for the administrative cost. Then you have the profit on top of that. When you add in the cost of prescription drugs on top of that is exclusively an American issue, we pay 42 or 43 cents of every single dollar to those three items: administrative costs for insurance companies, private profit for insurance companies, and the cost of pharmaceutical drugs.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you get from here to there? I mean, you have a whole industry, insurance, right? I mean, in fact, one of the things that the former President Obama said, I think it was when he was running, he said, if we had to do it all over again, I might want a single payer, but we are where we are.
Right. That's another great question, and I don't have the answer to that question. I think but the answer will be developed as you go through the process of actually examining the kind of a program, universal care, that you want to deliver. The way to get there will become apparent as you delve into the details and understand the problem in its granular form. And so that's a good question, but I don't have the answer right now.
Let me turn to the environment, because I know you're a big supporter of offshore wind off Ocean City. However, Ocean City officials are not so crazy about it because they're the proposed project will be too close as far as they're concerned in terms of being able to actually see these. On the other hand, the wind folks say if you push it out too far, they won't be able to actually set up the wind farm. Right. Where are you on this, and what do you tell the folks in Ocean City?
Well, as with every land use decision, there are balances, benefits, and there are things that you've got to consider. As the county attorney for Talbot County, we went through 2 comprehensive plans, so I understand the concerns of individual groups and factions and various parts of a society. My sense is that this is a trade-off, and the concern, in my view, this is my personal view, the concerns of the Ocean City officials are a little bit overstated. I don't think that this is going to be a real detriment to the tourist industry. I do think that there will be a certain number of folks who want to come to Ocean City to see this, and there was a study done by the Sage Policy Group to support that. Nevertheless, I think people come to Ocean City because it's a wonderful place. It's a great place to vacation. It offers practically everything that you could want for a family, and therefore none of that is going to change. I liken it to utility poles on the highway. I'm certain that when the countryside received electricity, that people began to notice these poles, and for several years probably looked at them and recognized them. But after that, we don't even see them anymore. And the same thing is true with windmills. We were in Germany. My wife and I went for our 40th wedding anniversary, and Germany has a great percentage of its power done through clean energy. These windmills, 600 feet high, were scattered throughout the countryside with these quaint, compact, historic German villages, and then this verdant green countryside, the hills and the mountains. It was beautiful, and you would see the windmills. And it didn't detract from the beauty of that scene, and my sense is that this is a trade-off that we have to make, because fossil fuels, there is no future, period. Climate change is real. Sea level rise is real. We on the Eastern Shore are the 3rd most affected area in the entire United States from the effect of sea level rise. We need to do something about it. Clean energy. This project, for example, creates enough clean energy for 500,000 homes. That's huge. 9,700 jobs. Over $100 million of investment in infrastructure. So the benefits are huge.
Let me turn to agriculture and the environment. I think I've asked you before, but how do you balance those two? And in terms of the Chesapeake Bay, for example, we have the incumbent Republican who voted and strongly supported keeping the Restoration Bay money in the budget, despite what the Trump administration wanted to do, which was to take it out. How are you going to be all that different?
Well, I don't necessarily accept the idea that he was strongly in favor, because although the administration wanted to zero it out, and this program works and works well, and it's something that we must continue and expand, he voted to reduce it by $13 million, which was about, the total was $73 million, and he wanted to take 13 of that. I don't know what that percentage is, but it's a significant portion. So I don't think that he's a zealous advocate for the Bay. My view is that we not only need to keep that funding in place, we need to increase our efforts. Now, agriculture versus environment, my sense is that farmers are stewards of the environment. Cover crops, they are in the forefront on the Eastern Shore. And the reason is that their farms depend on the sustainability of this environment, and they are working hand in hand for sustainable agriculture and sustainable environment. My hope and my sense is that the the folks that are concerned about the Bay and the farmers have common interests that we can identify and pursue, and we've already seen that cooperation.
And the poultry industry? I mean, we've already had fights about the large operations, the CAFO's large chicken operations.
Well, yeah, and that's a subset. That's
Yeah,
a
it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a specific issue, and there's a lot of environmental impacts from these CAFOs, and they need to be evaluated. And not only the environmental impacts, but also the zoning. I think they need to be located in areas that are not going to impact residential areas and not impact existing homes and neighborhoods, because for a number of reasons. Number one, there's a serious question about airborne problems with asthma, and just to have that next door really does devalue the residential neighborhoods for obvious reasons. But nevertheless, there's a zoning in particular. That's the function of zoning, to make these uses that are incompatible when they're next to each other both available in areas where that incompatibility is either eliminated or minimized. And so again, it's a question of federal and state environmental regulation and review based on science, and then local zoning to manage those impacts in a way that best promotes the public good.
I want to turn to education. We know that the price of education is going up year after year, particularly the higher education. I can remember when I went to school, which many years ago, which to maybe a couple $100, and I was good for a state college, no more. What would you do about the cost of education? Would you have free college? Some people have suggested that. Certainly Bernie Sanders suggested that. Hillary Clinton was a little more modest about the idea, and particularly student debt.
Another great question, because it's a serious problem. And I want to start with a little historical perspective. In 1971, the cost of attending UMES in Salisbury, $322 a year for tuition. So a student could move home, work 6 weeks at a minimum wage job, which was $1.75 an hour, and have enough money to pay tuition for a year. Students today no longer have that option. We need to invest in public education. My view is that we need to make up to 4 years of public education at college and universities free tuition. And the example I just gave shows that we have already done this.
The question is, how do you pay for it?
How do you pay for it? Okay. The military budget this year, they requested $554 billion, which I believe was about a $60 billion increase over last year. They ended up with $700 billion. They ended up with a lot more than they requested. If we took $80 billion and invested it in our educational system, that we could have done that right there. So it's not a question of, it's not a difficult choice, but it's a question of what is the political will? Are we ready? Are we willing? Do we want to invest in our young people, in our higher education? And it's not just higher education, it's also job skills and technical training. This administration's budget proposed a reduction of 40% in job training and job placement. Now, we do have a lot of available jobs, 6.6 million available jobs, which is a great number. The problem is we don't have the folks with the technical skills and the qualifications to fill those jobs. Employers are looking for highly skilled workers, and we don't have those workers. The short answer, by investing in our students, by investing in job training and technical training, we are building our economy. We're building families. Strong families make strong communities. Strong communities make a strong country. That's where we need to be investing, not throwing money at the military.
Let me turn to then trade. Seems like a logical conclusion here. We, of course, have the president pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. We see him talking about more bilateral agreements between individual countries, but also potential trade war, as it were, with China, with upping the tariffs. Where were you in terms of the TPP, and how do you view trade policy, and what do you think about the free trade deals in general?
So I was against the TPP for a number of reasons. Number one, I think that it would create a race to the bottom in terms of American workers' wages. We've seen the effect of NAFTA, where in Easton, for example, Black & Decker plant used to run 24 hours a day. It used to employ, I believe, 800 people on a shift, and all of that has gone. All of that has gone right over the border from Brownsville, Texas, into Mexico. They pay their workers $50 a week. And those jobs were good jobs. Those jobs, I knew lots of folks that worked at Black & Decker as a career. So I'm glad that we didn't get into the TPP. Now, the larger question, because of its effect on American workers' wages, the larger question is, how do we balance American interests versus, for example, the Chinese? It's a great question. And the Chinese economy and the American economy are inextricably bound, as we are with all nations. I believe that this idea of tariffs is the wrong idea. Tariffs do not work. Trade wars cause hardship on both sides. There's no real winning of a trade war. I think all economists agree on that, and I'm concerned about the policy that we see of America alone taking steps to distance itself from its trading partners and also its political allies. And this is just one more example of that. And I think that American foreign trade policy needs to recognize that we have mutual interests, that we can both benefit. All nations and countries benefit from more trade, and it. So
I guess one of the questions is, well, if free trade agreements are not the approach, if putting pressure on other countries through tariffs is not the proper approach, how do you get a country like China so that to agree to the idea that they're not going to take your jobs? I mean, what's the mechanism? What's the leverage?
So those decisions are actually made by individual companies, and they are made with profit in mind. And so Carrier, for example, shipping its jobs to Mexico, Black & Decker, same thing. The problem that we're having, and it's a difficult problem to solve, I don't think I have the answer and can't give it to you this morning, but here's the problem. Labor is becoming transferable. Capital is becoming transferable, so that companies are investing in labor markets where the labor is cheapest. That hurts American workers. We need to develop an economy in America that is based on providing good jobs to American workers and American families so that they can enjoy a standard of living that we have enjoyed to this point. And it's a big problem. My sense is that clean energy is the number one opportunity, and it's a very, very fast-growing industry. It's providing fastest-growing number of new jobs. We need to be investing in clean energy. We need to be getting on board with climate change as real and adapting to it. We see, and virtually the entire world is in agreement that this is a national and international and worldwide threat to security, and it's a threat that we can deal with, but we have to start. We don't want to cede those economic opportunities to other countries like we're doing right now We don't want, for example, the Chinese to become the preeminent innovator, manufacturer, and deliverer of technologies that will promote clean energy. And yet I think that's what's happening.
I want to turn finally to minutes we have left. Foreign policy, particularly, we have the president, of course, has pulled out of the Iran deal. I'm interested about what your reaction is to that, and what your sense is about foreign policy overall in terms of how we relate to various regions.
Well, let's talk about the Iran deal first. I think it's wrong to have pulled out of the Iran deal for a number of reasons. Number one, again, the world opinion and the facts are that Iran was in compliance with that agreement. If America breaks its agreements, then the question becomes, how credible are we? How reliable are we? Credibility and reliability and predictability are essential. If America is going to be able to negotiate in good faith with foreign adversaries that have competing interests, we simply cannot renege and violate agreements that we have entered into after years of tough negotiation with our partners, with our European allies, with Russia and with China. This precedent is the wrong way to go. I'm very concerned about the precedent that it sets, because I think that our credibility, our reliability, our trustworthiness to follow through with agreements that we make is essential, and we have, in my mind, always honored our agreements. Once we start going in a different direction, we introduce an element of uncertainty I think it's a self-inflicted wound, and it's the significance of that wound remains to be seen.
By the way, what do you make of the summit that's coming up with the North Korean leader and the president?
Well, I think it's a great sign. I think that there have been previous summits between North Korea and the South. This is the first one between the U.S. and North Korea. I applaud that. I believe that it provides an opportunity. I am concerned with the level of preparation, the level of, we know that the president doesn't read his presidential daily briefs, and that concerns me because I'm not certain about the level of detail that he'll have going into that negotiation. And I'm also concerned about the level of what I'm going to label as overconfidence in his own ability to negotiate a deal. When you're dealing with real estate in Manhattan, something you've dealt with from the time that you first went into business, that's one thing. When you're dealing with international relations that deal with nuclear weapons that have worldwide consequences, life and death, survival or not, that's entirely something else. And there are experts in that field who understand how that works. And I'm not certain that the president is willing to rely on experts for guidance. So,
we've been speaking with Mike Pullen. He is a Democratic candidate in the 1st Congressional District here in Maryland. He would, of course, probably attempt to unseat the incumbent Republican, Andy Harris, if he wins that primary. We appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thank you, Don. Really appreciate it.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Frank. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on Pack 14.